What's going on, guys? My name is PJ, and today I am back to talk about a video or talk about a subject from the Enneagram that I'm sure some people have discussed before, but this is something that when I think about the Enneagram, I really see this within the Enneagram. I see this topic that I'm going to talk about today as something that the Enneagram helps magnify. And so, um, you know, the Enneagram is a psychological, spiritual tool, and you can use it so many different ways, right? So, for example, a hammer, right? A hammer can be used for a nail, but it could also be used for, something else. And maybe that's not the best example or metaphor, but what I was trying to say is that some people look at the Enneagram from a purely psychological standpoint, which is great. Some people look at it from something that's cool and hip and tells them more about themselves, and that's fine. But I have found that the Enneagram is a very powerful spiritual tool. And when we use it for spiritual purposes, it really shines a light on certain aspects of divinity, of our own reality, and different spiritual topics and spiritual understandings that if we take the time to look at closely what the Enneagram is saying to us, we can really discern certain realities and certain truths about the spiritual nature of life. So, today I'm going to focus on, and in most of my videos, I try to focus on the spiritual aspect of the Enneagram. And today, for sure, I'm going to talk about a spiritual understanding that I have been able to gain and kind of cultivate and create for myself in my head and in my own understanding. And with most of the videos that I make on this channel, I don't necessarily want to come here and reiterate what's already been said about the Enneagram and what people already have done a phenomenal job discussing about in books and in videos and in different platform in different things and different platforms. I really want to come and talk about my own experience with the Enneagram and my own understanding from the Enneagram, because I really do believe that, if we put the lens of our own perspective on different things that we can learn, we can come up with new insights that have already been in there, but because we are the one looking at a certain topic, we can bring up and bring those insights through. And so I want to just talk about insights that I have gained from the Enneagram. So today, I want to talk about this topic that I call discerning the faces of God through the Enneagram. So what do I mean by that? That's like my glorious name that I've given this topic, but I really wanted to talk about how the different Enneagram types. So if you've never heard about the Enneagram, basically it's a framework. It's a 9-pointed shape. Each of these 9 points, so to speak, on this circle, I'll put the shape probably right here. Each of these 9 points, they're talking about a certain personality type. So these are, Enneagram basically says you can put humans in 9 primary patterns that they act. So it creates these 9 personalities, and each of these 9 personalities struggle with a certain aspect or magnifies a certain aspect of individuality and of being. So each have their own basic desires, they have their basic fears, they have their super ego message, which is basically like the voice that plays in their head and what it tells them. And each has its own name that people have given it. So for example, the type 1 is the perfectionist, the type 2 is the helper, and it goes all the way to 9. When I say discerning the faces of God through the Enneagram, what I'm really trying to show and what I have been able to find and discern through the Enneagram is that if we want to really learn about the character and the nature of divinity of God, not that we can ever put it in words, not that we can ever say, here's God, here's the character of God, and you can see it, but I personally look at the character and the personality of Jesus. Okay, so I look at the life of Jesus and I try to use that as a basis for seeing and discerning and learning more about who God is. So when I look at Jesus and how he would react to different situations, how he would respond, how he would live, how he would act, I say, okay, that's for me. You might have a different perspective. You might be a different, and this is not necessarily saying something about being Christian. And you can be of any religion or of no religion. And if you look at the story or the life of Jesus, you can really learn a lot about the character of, you can just call it being an amazing human being. If you don't believe, let's say, in God, or a creator or anything like that, and you just look at the way Jesus went about life and how he handled situations. I look at that, and to me, what that shows is the character of divinity. And so when you put the Enneagram, let's say, on the character of Jesus, let's say, you can see that he really knew how to bring out a certain type from, how he would go about his day and what the situation would require of him, how he would tap into these different types and different faces of God, and how he would use what would be the most helpful in each situation. So, in some situations, he kind of was like a type 8, which is the challenger type. In some situations, and some of his sayings sounded like something a type 1 would say. In some situations, in a lot of situations, he was seeking to help people like a type 2 would. And so for me, when it comes to looking at the Enneagram and trying to discern the different faces of God, what I really mean by that is that each of these 9 personality types, they can show us an aspect of divinity if we have eyes to see and ears to hear. So what do I mean specifically? So let's look at type 1. The type 1 is the perfectionist type. So there's a saying by Jesus that says, "Be you therefore perfect, just as your Father in heaven who is perfect." So the way I see that is that my belief, I'm just going to talk about my belief. My belief is that we are children of a creator called God. We are children of the Father, the Heavenly Father, God, and we are all equal in front of God. And God, our creator, is perfect, okay? God, which really, you can't really say it's a he or she or this and that, it's God, okay? Even trying to put words on God is already limiting God, because God is just infinite, right? It can't be bound by words per se. But to the best of my ability, I'll try to explain kind of like how I see and view divinity from my understanding at this moment in time and my perspective right now. So God is perfect, and we are made in the image of God. Now, it doesn't mean that in our absolute humanity we are perfect per se, but we have that spark or that element of perfection within us. And this doesn't mean perfect in terms of like, oh, I'm perfect and I'm better than this other person who is not perfect. It really means that within all of us, if we look with the eyes of absolute and true forgiveness on everyone, and we see them for not necessarily their deeds and all this stuff, but see their essence, even in the so-called biggest sinner or the biggest criminal, you can still, if you absolutely forgive that person, meaning that you see them how God in his absolute mercy and in his unlimited forgiveness would see that person. If you look at them from that perspective, you can see that perfection of divinity still within that person, who we might not be able to, with our human eyes, might not be able to see that perfection. But if we look with our spiritual sight, with our spiritual vision, with our spiritual goggles, and we forgive that person absolutely and entirely, no matter how, let's say, awful they might be, or what horrible deeds they might have committed, if we can absolutely forgive that person, we can see the perfection of divinity still within that person, as it is in my belief, within all of us. So the type 1s, being the perfectionist type, they're the ones that show us the perfect aspect of divinity. So when I say discern the faces of God through the Enneagram, the way I've been able to kind of see the different faces of God, the different aspects of God, different qualities, different characteristic types of God per se, of the creator, of divinity through the Enneagram, is that I look at a type. So I look at type 1, which is called like the perfectionist type. And I ask myself, what is this type? What can this type show me about the character of divinity? So the perfectionistic or the perfect, when we look at type 1 individuals, let's say, so each type, according to the Enneagram as is taught by Riso, Hudson, and Don Riso or Russ Hudson. So I may be saying the names wrong, but they are the founders of the Enneagram Institute, which I talk about very often in my videos. So in their way of teaching the Enneagram, they say that each personality type navigates within 9 different levels of health. So, they can be like at their worst or at their best. And at their best, when I think about it, at their best, every single type, every single person of different type, at their best, if we look closely with our spiritual goggles, we can see and we can discern what quality, what characteristic of God that person is showing us. So the perfectionistic person who seeks integrity, who seeks honesty, who seeks the work being done to its best ability, to its when you look at, let's say, like a structure, a statue that's perfect, there's something divine about that. There's something just holy about something that's done to its absolute perfection. And so when I look at these 9 types, each of these 9 types, they're showing me a quality of God. The type 1s show me the perfection of divinity, and or the quality of God that's perfect. And God basically, so if you look at the Enneagram shape, if you look at these 9 types, God is not limited within any of these types. Neither are we. So you need to understand that as well about the Enneagram, is that you're not limited to your type. You're all the types, okay? But you have different aspects of all these types. You have these types into different percentages in you. Divinity is the sum total of everything, including all these types per se, okay? And divinity, if you look at the Enneagram symbol, is not in one of these types, it's the whole thing. So for me, divinity, when we look at the Enneagram, divinity is a circle. Divinity is where everything is a part of. So the divinity, God, is like, we are all a part of God. And we have a part of God within us. We are all a part of divinity. So divinity is a circle, and the 9 types are within that circle. And so the 9 types are the different aspects of divinity. The reason this is kind of difficult for me to explain is that this is something that I've come up with, that I have, I'm learning as I go. So bear with me as I try my best to explain kind of like what I see and how I view it. But the basic principle that I'm trying to communicate in this video is that each type at its highest, each person of each type, when we look at them with the eyes of forgiveness, when we see them at their best, when we see them as their highest expression, they might not be exuding or embodying their highest expression as a type 9. I might not always be at my best of really mediating between people, keeping the peace. The type 9s are the peacemakers. I might always not be that. But if someone could see through, or I could see someone through the eyes of forgiveness. And the reason I say this, the eyes of forgiveness, is because I follow the Course in Miracles. And the Course in Miracles is a spiritual text. And the Course in Miracles really talks about the importance of forgiveness in our spiritual evolution. And forgiveness means you kind of look at someone and you see them as God would see them. You see them as a child. We associate children with purity. When you look at a baby, you don't really think that that baby is like a bad baby or an evil baby. It's like especially when a baby's like sleeping and at peace, you see that perfection, and you see that sinlessness, that goodness of that baby. The forgiveness, the way I envision it, is that we look at a person for not necessarily their behavior or who they are, but for the essence of divinity that is within them. We try to discern the divinity that is inherent within every single living creature, every single human, sentient being. And so, when we look at people of different types with the eyes of forgiveness and we see them for their highest expression, we can learn something about the quality of divinity about the character of God through the different people that we encounter in our day-to-day life. So, I talked about type 1. To me, the type 1s show the perfection face of God, the aspect of God, the perfection. It's like when you look at nature, it's perfect. When you leave it, it's like even like everything is just, or galaxy, how like everything just, the earth rotates at the right speed at the right time. Everything is just like in like perfection. That is showing us, if you allow it to show you, an aspect of God. So what does a type 2 aspect of God, or sorry, the type 2 personality type per se, what does that show us about the character of God? The type 2s are the helpers. They're the ones that really seek to be of service to other people, to help other people, to meet other people's needs. And again, each of these types has 9 levels of health. So this is not necessarily the video that I'm going to dive deeply into each type and talk about the type. I'm just talking about the quality that type represents from divinity, of divinity. So the type 2s really, to me, represent the aspect of God, or the face of God, that seeks to always help us. To me, like, prayer is a way of asking God to help you, because it's almost like God doesn't have the right per se to overwrite. This is like my viewpoint. He can just barge in. It's kind of like having a warrant. Like, God needs a warrant, and that warrant is your request for help. It's like your prayer. If you pray and say, "Dear God, help me. Dear God, help me see this differently. Dear God, help me see this person in a new light, in how you would see them." When you send those requests to the divine, God is so willing, time and time again, to help us, to help you. And like, God just cannot wait for us to ask to be helped by him. But he's never going to barge in. He's never going to force his way and override our free will. God is in his lovingness, he wants us to ask for help before he offers it. And he knows what we want. He knows what we need, but he needs our requests. He can't just come in without a warrant, in that metaphor. So the type 2s show us, in my viewpoint, the eagerness of divinity, of God, to help us, to offer its helping hand, to offer its helping guidance, time and time again. Just like a type 2 individual at their best, they're like that. These are some of the most generous people you'll ever encounter. They're the ones that always want to help meet the needs of other people. And so you can look at different people, especially people that are like embodying the highest level of health of each type. You can look at that person and you say, man, like, they're showing me a quality about divinity within and what they're embodying, what they're living, within their personality, within who they are, by their life. It's like Gandhi said, like, my life is my teaching, my life is my message. And that's how I see Jesus too. His life was his teaching. Look at how he went about handling different situations, how he navigated, how he responded to different situations. His life, his way of being, was the teaching. And so when we look at people that are living at the highest expression of each type, they're showing us an aspect of divinity. If we have the eyes to hear and ears, or sorry, eyes to see and ears to hear. So the type threes, moving on, the type threes are called achievers. They're the ones that type threes show other humans what's possible. They are all about, like, when you think about Tony Robbins, okay? Tony Robbins is probably a good example of type 3. He's all about unlimited potential, tapping your unlimited potential, reaching your destiny, tapping and becoming your absolute highest potential. So God, when I think about divinity, everything is evolving and it's moving. It came from God and it's moving towards God. But we have to consciously choose to evolve. We have to consciously participate within our evolution and in our journey of becoming our highest expression, becoming and reaching our unlimited potential, so to speak. We need to choose to be on that path towards that unlimited potential. Now, we might never reach it in this lifetime, but at least, like, I think it's helpful for us to look at our life from an eternal perspective, thinking that, like, I will do my best in this life to be my best self, but I might not see the fruits of that to the highest degree in this lifetime. Now, some people believe in reincarnation, that you come and you kind of like start again, but you start at the level that you ended in the last life. So it's kind of like if you ever play video games and you like respawn, in some video games you respawn, you come back to the game after you die, but you start with no levels, right? Like you start at the very level 0 again. So you might get to like level 20, die, come back, start at level 0 again. But some days you build upon what you had already accomplished. So if you were at level 20, you die and come back, you start at level 20 again. So in this metaphor, if you believe in reincarnation, and even if you don't, okay, even if you, I don't know if you're going to reincarnate or not. I can't say as a matter of fact that we do or we don't. I think at the end of the day, it's all about, does that concept, is that helpful for you? Does it help you become your highest expression? For me, it kind of does when I think about, okay, let's look at life, not from like reaching your unlimited potential in this life, but reaching your unlimited potential in eternity. Like let's say if you believe in reincarnation and that you come back at the level that you left at the last life, like the more you can do in this life in terms of like making sure you participate in your own divine evolution. Like God wants us to become, like, God is like our own personal Tony Robbins. Like he wants us to become the best version of ourselves. He wants us to be the best, highest expression of who he has created us to be, because he knows what he's planted within us. He knows the potential that's within us. So like, what parent, if you look at God as a father, what parent wouldn't want their child to become the best version of themselves, to become the highest expression of themselves? Because they know how much they're capable of. Like that's why it's so hard for parents to see when their child is living below his or her potential. It's very difficult for parents, from what I've heard, to see that, because they know how capable that child is. And that's how God sees us from an eternal perspective. So it's like, the way I see it is, God wants us to reach our highest expression. Sometimes it might not happen in this lifetime. And so you might come back and do it again. And even if you don't come back, let's say you go and transition into the heavenly realms, okay? You go and you after death, let's say you go in the ethers, you go into the heavenly realms, you go into the non-physical realms. Well, maybe in that realm, your spirit, energy never dies, it just transfigures itself. Maybe in that realm, you are now like starting from where you left off, where your spirit left off. It's almost like your spirit is going through all these different experiences to remember itself and to rekindle its divine spark within you and allow it to shine forth within this life or the afterlife, or the life after this life. So whether you believe in reincarnation, whether you don't, whether you believe that we transition to a heavenly realm after this life, I do believe that like we continue, whether it's coming back to the physical or like going to the spiritual realm and then continuing there. But I do feel like that this journey continues. And it continues until we all remember the divine spark and we reach our highest expression. And until we all reach it, I think the game will continue. So when it comes to what the Enneagram is showing us about the character of divinity, what the type 3s show us is it's the aspect of divinity that seeks to reach its highest potential, to be the best it can be, to be the absolute most that it can be. Everything that like a seed that's planted, and an acorn that turns into an oak tree. That acorn has within it the desire to become the highest expression of that oak tree. And it already has within it the potential to become that. It needs the right soil. You know, the difference between an oak tree, or the difference between the acorn turning into an oak tree and us, is that we have to choose to grow. Whereas when the acorn is placed within the right environment, within the right soil, it automatically grows. We have to choose to grow, but that is a part of us, that is the divine face, the divine aspect within us that chooses, like that even has the desire to become more, to become its highest expression, to become the best version of itself. Like that is a divine quality. It's almost like, you know, if let's say you believe in like the idea of the fallen world. This is a fallen world. This is, you know, if we came from perfection and divinity, and now we're in this fallen world. Well, even if we're in this fallen world, like the desire to be the best you can be, to be the highest expression that you can be, to be like literally who God created you to be, that desire is divine. Like there is a divine spark, there's a divine aspect within that. And so that's kind of like what the type 3 shows us. So what does the type 4 show us? What can we learn about the character of God through observing the type 4s at their highest expression? So if you think about the 9 levels of health as it's taught by Don Risso and Russ Hudson, who are the founders of the Enneagram Institute, they have identified these 9 levels of health for each type. So if you look at the highest level that a type 4 can show up as in the world. So the type 4s are the artists, they're the creatives, they're the individualists, they're super unique. I believe that like when they show up as their highest self, they're some of the most creative, some of the most visionary, some of the most, I mean, yeah, creative is the right word. They're like some of the most creative beings. So what does that show us about the character of divinity? When you look at life, okay, I choose to believe that like a creator created this plane, this world. Like it's so creative. There's like so first of all, no two humans, even identical twins, are not alike. No two people have the same fingerprint. There are all these like creatures, they all look different. They're like different. There's like millions of fishes and then millions of birds, and like all like the level of creativity. Like you look at, let's say, a movie like Avatar, okay, and you look at just like the level of creativity of like thinking about the creatures and thinking about the creativity that went into like the visual effects and all these things, or whatever, you know, most movies, you're like, dang, like, so how much more went into creating life as we know it? Because most of the time, you know, life, like some people say life imitates art, but like art imitates life. Like I remember when I played video games a lot, I used to always think, man, life really has the best graphics. You know, like when you play video games a lot and you get obsessed with this idea of wanting to like play games that even have better graphics than the ones that you're used to playing, which is why I'm so tempted to buy the new Xbox and the PS5, but I'm not going to, probably. But what's so cool is like when I used to play video games a lot, when I looked at life, I was like, this is literally the craziest game ever. It's like I used to love massive like role-playing games that the world was massive, like Skyrim or Oblivion and games like that, or Mass Effect. And these games had just like a massive playing field. You could go discover the different parts. Well, the world is like that. Life is like that, and it's just like so creative. It's the most creative thing that there is. It's almost like all the games, all the video games, all the movies are trying to kind of like get to life's level, which I don't think we're ever gonna reach per se. Like we're never. Well, I don't want to say never. Anyways, the type fours show us the creative aspect of divinity, I believe. And again, this video is more so like, this is not like a set in stone, this is what they say, like about divinity. I'm just saying, hey, I've learned and have been able to learn more about God through the Enneagram. It's like when you want to learn about the character of God, let's say, you want to like learn more about who God is, how he is. And I am of the belief that God is our Father and that he created us and that we are all his children, all of us, all equal in front of God. Like God is our creator and we're all on the same equal playing field, no matter how successful in worldly terms, how rich, how poor, how healthy, how sick, like it doesn't matter. Like we're all children of God and equal in that same playing field in front of God. So, and we came from the Father and we knew the Father, and then when we come into this world, we forget our spiritual nature and our Heavenly Father. And then so our journey becomes to remember who we are, and in order to remember who we are, we have to remember who our Father is. It's like these movies that try to like find their parents of origin, and they're like, well, I need to find them to know who I am, or like why I am the way I am, and so on and so forth. It's kind of like we're the same way. Like we're trying to find God, we're trying to remember our Father, and like say, okay, who is he? Like how is he? What are his qualities? And so the Enneagram kind of helps us remember aspects of divinity, at least the way I look at it. And yeah, I'll just leave it at that. I just get so amped up to talk about topics that I have like, I don't want to say like, yeah, I mean, I'll say discovered, but topics that I'm just like, just seeing them, like I'm like, oh my God, like guys, look at this. There's like something here. And I get so amped up and I kind of like turn into like Kanye West, like going like a million places as I'm talking. But it's just because I'm like, isn't this cool? Like I just want to share that with you guys. And I want to hear so much more from you and what you think about the different aspects of divinity that we could possibly see through the Enneagram. So let's move on to type 5s. The type 5s are called the thinkers, the philosophers, the investigators. But what do they show us about the character of divinity? So type 5s are super smart. They're the ones that are so knowledgeable. They like gather so much information. They love learning super in depth about topics. They just know a lot of information. They're like Google. And what they show us, and at their highest, type 5s at their highest, they're so wise. Like I just think of an owl when I think of a type 5. Like they're that wise owl that just knows. Like you're talking about a topic and they just know so much about it, and they know like they have wisdom about it. It's not just about like having information. Google has a lot of information, but there's difference between having a lot of information and being wise. And type 5s at their best are wise. They know exactly, like a good personal trainer that is wise is not the personal trainer that knows like every single muscle and ligament and all the different variations of an exercise and so on and so forth. It's the personal trainer that is wise, or the teacher that is wise, is the one that knows exactly what to say at what time for the needs of that student per se, for the needs of that client, if this is the personal training situation. And that's wisdom. Like, they have wisdom. They know what to say, when to say it, what other people need to hear, what information is needed. It's not about having, like, saying everything. A personal trainer, I used to be a personal trainer, and one of the main struggles that a lot of personal trainers have is that they have all this information, and like, just doing a back squat has like 20 steps. But what are the most beneficial 3 steps that I can tell this client that has never done a back squat, so that they can get started, and then we'll build on it? If I say 10 different things that they need to keep in mind as they're doing this first squat, as even though I might so really want to tell them all that, it wouldn't be wisdom to tell them all that off the bat, because they might not be able to focus on all of them. And so wisdom, that is a quality, I believe, of divinity that type 5s show us. They have that wisdom. They have that quality of, when I look at my life, I see so many situations where I wanted something, and in my limited knowledge and in my limited understanding, I thought that thing, that whatever it might have been, that would have been the best thing for me. But as time adds on, and as I grow more in understanding and wisdom, I can look back and say, man, like, I'm glad that thing that I thought I wanted, I didn't get, because I got this other thing that was so much better for me, so much more right for me. And so if you were to be a wise, let's say, father, okay, a very wise parent, and your child asks for, like, they're heading to college, let's say, and they don't have a laptop, and you're going to need the laptop for sure if you're going to go to college. In most situations, you're going to like constantly be doing homework on a laptop, writing essays, whatever. So you need a laptop, but the child might be asking for, Dad, can you buy me, I don't know, like a car, right? And they might already have a car, and it's good enough to get them through college. But what they really need, that might be what they want. They might want a 2020 Mustang, but what they really need is a laptop. So, like, a good father will give them what they need, not necessarily what they want. I mean, they might do both, but if they had to like prioritize, the good father, in his wisdom, he knows that the child might need a laptop more than the car, the new car, even though they already have a car that works just fine. So the father, in his wisdom, gives them what they need. So God, in his wisdom, he so often gave me what I needed, not necessarily what I wanted. And so in the moment, I might have thrown a fit, but as time adds on, I see the wisdom in divinity. And like I always say, every time I pray, every time I ask God for anything, I try to use the same example as Jesus, and say, at the end of all prayer, say, but yet not my will, but thy will be done. Because I believe God is all wise, and he knows what's best for us and what we need, even before we know. And so I allow that loving father, that wise father of mine, to decide for me what would be best for me. And I really think that's like the highest way of living, to have and to live, in a way that Jesus really showed us. So going back to what I was saying at the beginning of this video, as to how I look at Jesus and the life of Jesus and the character of Jesus, and I learned a lot about divinity. Well, Jesus was really wise. A lot of his decisions were really wise, and he embodied all these different characteristics that I'm talking about. Jesus was very creative. He was very wise. He knew, like, he just could come up like with an amazing parable, like just like right there on the spot. That's like so deep, but like just boom, so creative. He was like the best. He was like, his preaching, his way of living, it was amazing. It was like the best. Helpfulness, type 2. He was always helping meet the needs of the needy, the people that needed his help, the sick, those that needed, spiritual help, mental help, physical help. He was always willing and wanting to help people. And he was perfect. Be you perfect just as your Father in heaven who is perfect. Well, he was perfect. He lived a perfect life. He set an example. His life was the example. His life was the teaching. His life was for us to look at and say, man, that's what it's like to live at your highest expression. Like he was the highest expression, as I see it and as I believe. And I believe he was. He was the highest expression. He was the highest example of like how we could live. And the more I learn in terms of like the more wisdom I gain, the more I see the wisdom in his ways. Even though like at the time I might not see it when I first like hear how he responded to a certain situation. So anyways, let's move on to type 6. So what do type 6s show us, or what aspect of divinity, what face of God do they show us? When I think about type 6s, they're called the loyalist, the skeptic, they're the ones, if you've never heard of, the descriptions of the types, they're the ones basically that kind of, they have a mind that's geared towards looking towards what could be wrong or go wrong, what problems we might face in different endeavors that we're undertaking. And so they have this like, let's say they look at the empty half of the glass, and they might, one of their issues that they might face is like paralysis by analysis. Like they might be thinking so much about like what could go wrong that they kind of like paralyze themselves from being able to take decisive action. The opposite, so fear is something that's very associated with their type. The opposite of that, the opposite of fear, you can say, some people say it's love, but like it's courage. Like if you're fearful and you have courage is not necessarily the absence of fear. It's like you have the fear, but you still choose to do what is right and take the action that you need to take, even though you're scared, right? So that is courageous. And I think that is an aspect of the divine that they show us. God is courageous. Like when you think about the story of David and Goliath, David was very courageous, and his courage came in his faith and belief in God, and also knowing that he's honed his skills. So it's like he had faith and he had skills. He, when nobody was looking, he was already fighting lions and all kinds of like, predatory animals in nature. So when it came time to fight Goliath and everybody was like, just nobody had the courage to face him and fight that guy, he had the courage, he had the faith, he had the faith in God, he had that deep belief and that certainty in God, and he had the skills, right? So it's like not like just like he's never like worked out in his life, or like never thrown a stone, or never like been in any sort of battle, and like he just like has faith, like yeah, I'm gonna take down this Goliath. Like no, he had faith, he leaned on God, and he had cultivated his skills, and that's like a sweet spot, right? So his way of standing up to Goliath and fighting Goliath and winning against Goliath, like that was courageous. Everybody else didn't. Now, it didn't mean necessarily that he probably felt some fear. Maybe he didn't feel fear, but like most people, when they're going into a situation like that, they might feel fear, but the courageous person, this is not the fearless person, this is the courageous person. The courageous person feels the fear, but chooses to have a bigger faith than the fear, chooses to have more courage, chooses to have more bravery than the fear. So it doesn't let the fear dictate their life. They stand up to the fear, and you can call the Goliath the fear. For type 6s, the fear is as big as Goliath sometimes. I know this because I'm a type 9, and type 9s go to type 6s in disintegration. So when I'm stressed out, I become so very similar to a type 6. So I kind of know what goes through your head, and the gigantic feat that it seems to overcome that fear, just as it would be to overcome or fight Goliath and win. So David has that courageous factor. Or kind of going back to some other stories, like let's say, like about Jesus' life, the apostles that followed him to the end, and after he died and resurrected, and still like went on with courage, and did what was their calling, pursued their calling, like didn't mean that those people didn't have, like, they had doubt, they had times where they were afraid, and so they had all this, they might have had all this fear, but they still had something bigger than the fear, the faith that was bigger than the fear, courage. In the face of fear, they stood up to the fear, and despite the fear, is that the right? Yeah, despite the fear, even though the fear is there, they still did what was the right thing to do. And so that is my definition of courage. And really, courage is an aspect of divinity. Divine, like God is courageous. That's very, like, when you look at like the movie Braveheart, and I forget the main character's name, but Mel Gibson. Okay, Mel Gibson has courage, right? That is, when you look at that, like when somebody's willing to risk their life and stand up for the right thing and have courage, even though they might have fear, but still have courage that's bigger than the fear, and do what is their calling, do what is the right thing, like that is very divine. When you watch Braveheart and you see him do that and face that, like there's something very, like it sparks something very divine within you and within us. So to me, like, type 6s have that aspect of divinity represented. And so, okay, let's move on to, that's all I want to say about type 6s. Yeah, I think that's good. In the comments, if you're a type 6, or if you have your own ideas as to what type 6 is, what aspect of divinity, let's say, since that's the topic we're discussing, what aspect of divinity do type 6s represent in your eyes to us? So let me know in the comment sections below. And now let's go to type 7s. Type 7s are the adventurer type, they're called in the Enneagram. They're the fun-loving type. They're like the kid within all of us, right? The kid within all of us that wants to play, that wants to have fun, that wants to do kind of like the fun thing, not necessarily like the right thing all the time. Like the thing we need to do might not always be like the fun thing that we have to do, but they're the ones that just seeks to do the fun thing, the pleasure thing, the pleasurable thing. So it's like that childlike aspect within us. And I think like what they represent to us as an aspect of divinity, I think it's the playful aspect of divinity, like the joy seeking, like sometimes when people talk about God, I feel like it's like the sad vibe of like, God is just like there's a somber vibe to the discussion and the seriousness. But I think God is very like playful and like approachable and joyful. Like if you look at, like, let's say the character of Jesus, and kind of building on the idea that he, like, we might have not seen God, but if we look at him and believe that he is representing and showing the characters of God, like Jesus was very approachable. He loved, especially in his earlier life, I believe he loved being playful, and be just approachable. Like kids didn't feel threatened. He wasn't like always like, he wasn't like doom and gloom, sad, and like he had a joyful attitude, okay, and he had a playful, I won't say necessarily playfulness, but he definitely had a light. He was, I am the light of the world. He had a lightness about him, right? So I think that's the aspect of divinity, of like joy, like happiness, playfulness. Like those are aspects of divinity that I think the type 7s represent to us. And like if you've ever been close friends with a type 7, you'll know like they bring the fun, they bring like this this childlike happiness, right? When they're like, when you go hang out with type sevens and they don't like, they just like, if you hang out with them and like they're your friends, they bring the fun and it's like so light and you feel happy and in that state of happiness and in that state of like pure joy, you kind of experience something very divine, right? Now, I'm not going to get into discussion of like happiness versus like joy or like, you know, pleasure versus happiness versus joy, all this stuff. I think you guys get the gist of what I'm trying to point towards. Let's move to type 8s. The type 8s are called the challengers in the Enneagram. So they are the, you know, this is very similar to type 6s in terms of like when I was saying courage. But the difference is, I think that the type 8s are actually like fearless. The type 6s, they absolutely feel the fear and like they become courageous in this despite the fear. The fear might be there, but they're courageous. They're not letting the fear win. The type 8s might not have the fear. The type 8s are the leaders. That's another name for them. They're the ones that everybody look towards for leadership, and they naturally exude leadership at their best. They could like exude tyrannical vibes, you know, when they're at their worst. But I mean, we all kind of do. So the type 8s, when it comes to what they show us about divinity, about God, I think they show us the powerful aspect of God, the powerful nature of God. Another thing that people say about type 8s is like how powerful, like they just exude power. You know, they just have Martin Luther King Jr. was a type 8, you know, people say. And so, you know, he had, and if you ever read the Power book, the book Power versus Force by David R. Hawkins, which is one of my favorite authors and speakers and teachers, he talks about how power and force, like the dictator has force, and the force is a lower vibration, but power is one that induces a movement, an action within people's hearts. You know, some people define power as like the person that's powerful is the person who like inspires action within others, right? The dictator has to force action. But someone like Martin Luther King Jr., like he inspired action within other people. That has power, right? He didn't have to like force people to go and protest and, you know, like stand up for what is just and right. He inspired that within people. He had that power. He exuded power. And so that is like power is a very divine quality, you know, like, I mean, we always say like God is all powerful, all knowing, all wise, all merciful, all, you know, all, like I said, all powerful. Like God, it, you know, is very powerful. And, you know, you have to be powerful to like create everything. You know, if you believe as God as the creator of everything, like that takes so much power. Think about how much power it takes to create anything in this world. Like just create. You want to create a building, you know how much power that takes, like manpower, you know, you need power to lift all the things. You need a machine that's very powerful that lifts all the, you know, different objects for the building. I feel like if you're an architect and you watch my description of building a house, this was like probably the most excruciating description of how a building is made. But I'm just doing my best to communicate my version of like power. So anyways, they represent the powerful aspect of divinity. So let's go to type 9s. Type 9s are called the peacemakers, the peacekeepers. No, not the peacekeepers, they're peacemakers, but when you make the peace, you got to keep the peace too. So type 9s do that as well. I'm a type 9 myself. They're trying to figure out or remember another name for type 9s, but the peacemaker is the most common one. And they're also the one that, the type 9s are the people that seek unity within everyone. They want to bring people together. They are really good at seeing like opposing points of views and being like, okay, you know, you're a Democrat, you're a Republican, and I'm sure that like we can't agree, like we disagree on a lot, but can we see like unity? Can we be able to like live and let live? Like they have that attitude at their best. Type nines can be also like, I'm speaking for myself from experience here. It's not like we're always like just walking on air and like we're like bringing people all together and just peace, just falls upon everyone. Like it's not like that, but at their best, they do exude that quality of like mediating between opposing points of views, bringing peace. Like a type nine at their best when they walk into a room and let's say the room is agitated, everybody is agitated, they can bring some sense of harmony, some sense of calm into the atmosphere, into the room. So the aspect of divinity, the face of God that they represent, in my viewpoint, is the union, the unity aspect of God. And God is a uniter. Man is the one that seeks to separate and seeks to cause separation, right? Like God wants us to, I believe like God wants us to remember that we are all children before Him. We are all His children. We are all children of God. And we are killing each other, let's say, in a metaphorical and a real sense, because we don't see our common unity and brotherhood, and we don't see the oneness within everything. We don't see our, love your neighbor as yourself. That is like, love your neighbor as yourself. Like, see yourself in your neighbor. See your neighbor in yourself. See oneness, right, through the separation, right? So, like, there's separation between me and neighbor, right? There's a separation there because in the physical world, we see separation. But look beyond that. See oneness beyond the separation, the physical reality. It's like in the quantum physics, they say, like, the quantum field is like oneness, right? So we see separation, like I think this light is separate from me, but in like the quantum viewpoint, it's like everything is one, right? So God represents, and going back to what I was saying, like the Enneagram, like God represents the circle that everything falls within. Like that represents unity. That represents, God represents oneness, like in Christianity, they said the idea of Trinity, God, Father, God, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and how there are one, even though they're like three. That whole idea, like that's oneness again. That's unity. So I think the aspect of divinity that the type nines show us at their best is this quality of oneness. Is this quality of unison? Is this quality of bringing harmony and peace and people together? So. So yeah, that's it. I think when it comes to all the 9 types and what they teach us about the quality and the character of God. Again, like I said in the beginning of this video, this was kind of like a new topic that I had started experimenting with. I had started asking the question of like, what can I learn more about God and more about myself? These different aspects of that the Enneagram presents. What can I learn about God? What can I learn about who I can be as a whole individual by learning what they represent, what these 9 types represent. So what do they represent, when it comes to divinity? Like what aspect of God, let's say you get 9 people of all the 9 different types, and these are the people that are living at the highest expression of that type. If you're in that room and these 9 people are there, like they each are representing the highest and the most divine expression of certain qualities. The type 1 is showing the perfection of divinity. The type 2 is showing the mercy and the desire and the generosity and the desire for help, to be of service, to be of help of divinity. The type 3 is showing the best, the desire of divinity to reach its ultimate and absolute potential, to be all it can be, to evolve to its highest expression. The type 4s show the creativity of divinity. The type 5s show the wisdom of divinity. The type 6s show the courage of divinity. The type 7s show the joyfulness, the playfulness, the pure joy of divinity. The type 8s show the power of divinity, and the type 9s show the oneness of divinity. So this is an experimental topic, but to me it makes a lot of sense. And to me, going back to what I was saying about how I am a student of A Course in Miracles, and the Course in Miracles really reiterates forgiveness and the power of forgiveness and the necessity of forgiveness, in order to see as God sees and as God perceives. And it talks about how the lesson, their daily lessons in the Course in Miracles, and the daily lesson today for me was, until it's something like this: until I have forgiven, I am still blind. And to me, what that means is, until I look at all my brothers, all my sisters with the eyes of forgiveness. Now, this doesn't mean in like a societal level that like we don't have, like people can commit a crime and like never get prosecuted, and it's like all just like forgive, like you forgive, but it's not necessarily like this. I'm not talking about societal level. Like, I'm talking about the spiritual perspective of forgiveness. You look at all your brothers and sisters as children of God. So regardless of what harm or what wrongdoing they might have committed, or what offense they might have committed against you, you forgive, meaning that you see them as children of God, or as God would see them. You see them with the eyes of looking at them, at the child, the innocent child within them. So yes, the person might have committed some errors, some wrongdoings, but you look with the eyes of forgiveness. You look beyond that, and in the Course in Miracles it says that's Christ's vision, like Christ, which the Course in Miracles defines Christ as not just the character of Jesus. Jesus embodied Christ the most beautifully for everyone to see, but it also says that essence of Christ, that oneness within us, Christ within us, it lives within all of us. And basically forgiveness is looking not to the person, but to the Christ within, to the Spirit of God within each person. And from that perspective, you can start seeing how you can learn something from everyone. Because when you look at everyone with the eyes of forgiveness, you start seeing an aspect of God within that person, right? So going back to like putting that whole idea of seeing an aspect of God within people, especially when you look at them with the eyes of forgiveness, you see an aspect of yourself. If you believe that the Christ within you lives within them, Christ being the one, like the Spirit of God, the one Spirit of God that's within all of us, that is giving life to all of us, and calling that Christ. If you believe that exists in all of us, and with that mindset, you can see how everyone will and is showing you an aspect of the Creator, of God, who created that one Spirit. And so putting that now in the framework of Enneagram, you see how each individual of any type of these 9 different types shows you an aspect of divinity, of a virtue of God, a face of God. So that's how I'll wrap up this video about discerning the different faces of God through the Enneagram. And I understand that you might not hold any of the ideas that I just said, and you might not see it at all the way that I see it and I explain it, but I just wanted to, regardless, I wanted to kind of share how I see it and what I've found to be helpful for me when it comes to how to look at the Enneagram and what to learn from the Enneagram, what to discern from the Enneagram. I want to share that with you in hopes that it will be also helpful for you, and that you can learn more about yourself and more about God through the Enneagram. And one last thing I want to say is I love when I use the Enneagram as a way of knowing what aspect of me is needed. So being a type 9 is not what always is best. Sometimes I need to be a type 5 and gather a lot of information. Sometimes I need to be a type 1 and really think about how can I do, like, make this project I'm working on perfect. Sometimes I need to be a type 6 and think about what could go wrong. And so it's all about knowing what to step into, what aspect to bring out to be whole and like do the right thing. And I believe, going back to one of the first things I said about how Jesus shows us, Jesus did show us when to bring out what, how to respond in different situations and what different aspect to bring out. And if you really want to get into this more, if you are a Christian or a person that wants to be Christ-like, or a person that really is fascinated by the example of Jesus, or a person that just wants to learn more about the Enneagram, there's a book called The Enneagram, A Christian Perspective. This is by Richard Rohr, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the name of the other author that also co-authored this book with Richard Rohr, who is a priest. But this book really talks about the Enneagram and Christ, like the teachings of Christ and the Enneagram and how they go together. And it's a really awesome read, or an audiobook an awesome listen if you want to listen to the audiobook like I did. It's phenomenal. And one of the chapters is actually about, like, basically different teachings of Jesus and how, like, they show how well-rounded Jesus was. Like, he wasn't just one type. He knew when to be a different type. Like, when it was required of him to be a type 8, he would be a type 8. When it was required for him to be a type 9, he would be a type 9. So that is, like, to me, what I love about the Enneagram is knowing when to be what. Knowing in what situation how to respond and like what aspect to bring out, and in that way become a whole well-rounded being, just as Jesus, in my perspective, exemplified for all of us to see. So if you're interested more in thinking about that and like looking into that, I'd highly recommend that book by Richard Rohr. So, and that's it. So I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. Like I said, it was kind of more of an experimental kind of topic to get into. I hope that it was helpful for you. And if you enjoyed this video, please like it. And if you want to watch more videos similar to this, especially about the Enneagram, please subscribe to my channel. That would really, really help me out to get more videos like this out there and making sure that you guys see it. So thank you, and I hope to see you guys in the next video. Bye.